Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm hoping that this audio works better than it did in the past. We shall see. Hey, Mike, can you hear me tonight?
I can hear you well.
Oh, woohoo. Thank God. Baruch Hashem. Okay.
Maybe it'll go better this time.
I sure hope so. Let's give it a try.
Thank you.
All right, so last night we discussed or at least we attempted to discuss the Manishtana, the 4 questions. And it's interesting because there's a lot to ask about the Manishtana. Honestly, it doesn't excite me that much, so I was really just planning on like skipping over it. But if you sit there and you work on the nuances, so there's a lot of interesting things, which is like, for example, this child is supposed to be asking these questions. So why does he know that we dip twice? The only way that he could know that we dip twice is because he learned about it in school or something like that, or he remembers from a previous year. He only saw that we dipped the karpas, the vegetable, into the salt water. He didn't see yet anything about the maror being dipped into the charosas. So how did he come to ask about it? And so you could say that we have the maror on the Seder plate. So because the maror is on the Seder plate, that's why that's why he's asking the question. Similarly, like he's asking in general about the maror. So, but I don't know. These are interesting questions about the Manishtana. Hold on, my daughter Simma is also here. Yes, Simma.
You could say that the reason why he's asking, why did they dip twice? Because they only dipped once so far, because Father's telling him what they're going to be doing tonight a little bit. He's going to be explaining to him because he doesn't just want to leave him totally in the dark.
All right, so I don't know if you get that. Simma wants to suggest an answer that perhaps the father, when he dipped the first time, he told him we have another dip coming up. So that's why he was prepared for that. Could be. But the way that it works is that essentially this is the beginning of Magid. Magid is the main part of the Seder, or at least the main oral part of the Seder. It's where we tell the story of the Exodus. And interestingly enough, this is maybe the source for why rabbis like to do this. The famous idea that Jews always like to ask questions. So, right, someone asked a Jew, how come you always have to answer a question with a question? So he said, why not? So we find that good learning comes through the style of question and answer. So therefore, the Haggadah starts out with the Manishtana. The Haggadah starts out with the Manishtana, even though it's not the very, very beginning of the Haggadah, but technically that's where it really begins. And it's the child asking questions. And now we tell the child, okay, fine, great. So now that you asked the questions, come and let's learn together, and you'll learn the answers to these questions. So the whole style of the Haggadah is meant to be a form of questions and answers. So it starts out with Manishtana. The child asks these questions, and now the answers begin. Now there's a machlokas, there's a disagreement in the Talmud. The Talmud says that another unique characteristic about the mitzvah of telling the Exodus is that we have to start with the negative and then work our way to the positive. The Talmud doesn't say this, but it's probably obvious that the understanding is that you can only truly appreciate the good after you've suffered through the bad. So therefore it wants us to sit there and work our way through the bad to truly feel the bad, and after we felt the bad, then we can appreciate what the good is. There's a piece towards the end of Magid that says, Chayav Adam Liros Es Atzmo. A person is obligated to see himself as if he himself left Mitzrayim. which means that when we're sitting there at the Seder and we're experiencing, but we're telling the story. So it's really important to do more than just tell the story, but to actually try to have a feeling that we left Egypt. The only way to feel that you left Egypt is to feel the bondage beforehand. And then after you feel like you've experienced the slavery, then you can feel like you're leaving. Now, this is easier said than done. It's perhaps the most difficult mitzvah to do Pesach night. Interestingly, the Rambam, Maimonides, when he quotes this mitzvah, he doesn't say that there's a mitzvah to view yourself as if you left Mitzrayim, but there's a mitzvah to show yourself as if you're leaving Mitzrayim. In other words, it's not necessarily about the heart, about how you feel, but it's more that you do the outward actions. It's more that you do the outward actions. Now, perhaps the Rambam is just giving you advice that if you want to be able to feel it, so by going through the motions, that's a good way to get yourself in the proper mood so that you should feel that way. I remember when I was in, I think it was 4th grade, my teacher had us come dressed up one day as if we were leaving Mitzrayim so that we could fulfill this mitzvah. Of course, it wasn't Pesach night, but and then we walked through the hallways. So I didn't know what in the world am I supposed to do to show that we're leaving Mitzrayim. So it says that the Jews they got all the valuables from the Egyptians. So my mother gave me like a bunch of necklaces to wear around my neck, and then I think I took a walking stick and a pillowcase over my back or over my shoulder, something like that, and paraded through the hallways so that all the other kids in the school could see that we were acting as if we were leaving Mitzrayim. So in order for a person to feel that that he is, in order for a person to feel that, to appreciate that he left Mitzrayim, so he also has to feel the slavery. Mike, is audio still good?
Very good.
Okay, thank God. So interestingly, there is a custom. I think it's a Persian custom that Bukharians are actually they're Russian Sephardim, that during Dayenu, I don't know why during Dayenu, but during Dayenu they take scallions and they whip each other. It's supposed to be the most exciting part of the Seder. They all grab scallions and they whip each other. But the idea is, again, to go through these motions or to feel like you're being whipped, so that we appreciate. So during the course of Magid, we're supposed to be sitting there trudging through all of the bad stuff that happened to us and thinking about what it means to have, babies thrown into the Nile River, to be beaten until you're bloody, to sit there and grab more bricks until you can't grab any more bricks. And when a person finally works their way through, then they work their way up to the 10 plagues, and they start to see that Hashem is exacting judgment against the Egyptians, and one after the other, there's these plagues going, and you discuss the plagues, and you're supposed to feel it until you finally get to the end of Magid, and then you're supposed to feel like that's it. I left Mitzrayim. In fact, we recline when we drink all 4 of the cups, but the Talmud has a whole discussion. It says that for whatever reason, the tradition was that you only have to recline for 2 out of the 4 cups. But then they didn't remember which 2 it was. Is it the first 2, or is it the last 2? So part of the arguments, they go back and forth. But part of the arguments that are presented is that the first 2 cups, that's when we're sitting there, that's when we're living it. After that, it's already like old history. It's done already. There's nothing. There's nothing to be excited about. Or perhaps the opposite is true. Perhaps during the first 2 cups, that's when we're still slaves. So if we're still feeling the slavery, so then it would be inappropriate to be leading because we feel like we're slaves. It's only later, after we've left Mitzrayim, which is at the end of Magid, which is after the 2nd cup, that's when we would recline for the 3rd cup and the 4th cup. So there's this real idea that we're supposed to sit there and we're supposed to vividly imagine or draw a picture for those that are with us at the Seder, that we are leaving Mitzrayim. Now, many have a custom, and I think it falls within this framework also, that when they've had sad things that have happened to them, like especially like Holocaust survivors, that they also talk about their own personal exodus at the Seder. So it's not really the focus of the night, but again, we're talking about suffering and all that fits in with the leaving, and understanding what the suffering is, and then moving from the suffering into into the times of happiness. So the Talmud says that we have to start with the negative and then work our way to the positive. So there's a disagreement between two rabbis from Talmud, Rav and Shmuel. What does it mean, the negative, and what does it mean, the positive? Everyone agrees what the positive is. The positive is that we left Egypt. But what's the negative? So one of them says that it's the spiritual negativity. The other one says that it's the physical. It's the physical negative. The Talmud doesn't record who said what. It just says that there was a disagreement between two of them, and it says one of them said this, one of them said that. So one of them says that it's the fact that we don't come from the best lineage, and that's what we're going to say in the Haggadah, that our fathers were idol worshippers. So if our fathers were idol worshippers, we feel a little bit guilty, like look where we come from. So therefore, that's the negative that we're talking about. We're talking about where our ancestors come from. It's actually a disagreement over there in the commentators of the Haggadah when we say that our fathers were idol worshippers. Who's that referring to? So it definitely could be referring to Terach. Terach is the father of Abraham, and right, that famous medrash that he had an idol shop, and one day he went out to go take care of some errands, and he left Avram in charge, and Avram broke all the idols. But so Terach was an idol worshiper, and he's the father. He's the father of Abraham. Interestingly, he's also the grandfather of Sarah. So he's from both sides. He's our forefather. And some people say, no, forget Terach. It's talking about Avraham himself, that Avram himself was an idol worshiper. In other words, Avram was brought up in a household that worshipped idols. So when he was young, his father took him to, I don't want to say church, but whatever it was, their house of idol worship, and he taught him how to pray. And it was only later that Avram realized that this is a mistake. There's a whole debate, exactly how old was Avram when he realized that there's a creator of the world. Some people say that it was a process, but either it started when he was very young, or no, he was only in his 40s. he was only in his 40s when he started to. He was only in his 40s when he started to believe in Hashem. So be that as it may. Okay. Be that as it may. So Avram was older in life, according to that opinion. And that means when he was younger, he worshipped idols. So that would be the negative. The other opinion is that no, what's the negative? The negative is the slavery. We have to talk about how rough life was during the slavery. So this is fulfilling that opinion. And then later on in the Haggadah, we're also going to talk about the spiritual negative. So we're up to Avodim Hayinu. For those people that are following along in the Haggadah, that would be right after the Manishtana. So the Manishtana is pretty much towards the beginning of the Haggadah. And then the answer to the child is Avodim Hayinu. Now, interestingly, we have 4 sons. The idea of the 4 sons is because there's 4 different times where it mentions in the Torah that a father should teach his son about the Exodus. So because it mentions 4 different times that you should teach your children, so therefore the understanding is there must be 4 different types of children. Now, 3 of those times the Torah introduces it, and it says to you when your child will ask you, when your child will say to you. And based on the different expressions, that's how we have a feeling that it's a different type of child. So like, for example, when it comes to the wise son, the Chacham, so it says, when your child will ask you. When it comes to the Rosh, it says, when your child will say to you. So some people say that you can pull out from there that the Rosh is not really asking a question. He's evil, and he just has his agenda that he wants to share. But he's not asking a question. So we can answer questions, but if somebody comes and they just want to give their editorial and leave, then that's a totally different story. So the Rosh is introduced by the Torah as when your child will say to you. The Chacham is introduced when a child will ask you. There's one place where it says, and you should tell your child, and it's not introduced by anything. It doesn't say your child will ask. It doesn't say your child will tell. It doesn't say anything. It just says, you should tell your child. So why is that one not introduced by anything? So that's because this is the child that doesn't know how to ask. So that's why we have this idea that there must be a child who's at the Seder. He doesn't know how to ask. So therefore, he can't be introduced by anything. So that's why the Torah just says to you, you should tell your child. So it happens to be that these words of Avodim Hayinu l'Pharaoh b'Mitzrayim, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. This comes from Parshas Ve'eschanan, from the book of Dvarim in the Torah, and this is the answer to the Ben Chacham, to the child that's the wise son. So So what does it say? It says, we were slaves to Paro in Egypt. Hashem took us out from there with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm. If Hashem would not have taken us out of Mitzrayim, behold, if Hashem, this part is not in the Torah, this is already the Haggadah talking. If Hashem would not have taken us out of Mitzrayim, then we would be slaves until today to Paro Mitzrayim. So everyone asks over here, what does that mean? We would still be slaves to Paro Mitzrayim? How could that be? So the Paro part is not such a difficult question, because you could say that every king was called Paro, every Egyptian king. So therefore, when it says we'd still be slaves to Paro, it doesn't mean the same Paro, and it doesn't mean the same us. It means our descendants, our great-great-great-grandchildren, would still be slaves to a Paro Mitzrayim. Now, does that make sense? Could that be? Perhaps yes. Perhaps not. Haggadah says yeah. Haggadah says yes. You'll say, what do you mean the whole world's been overturned? And well, okay, you're right. But perhaps the slavery would continue. Other people say that it means a more spiritual idea, and that is that there's this idea of a slave mentality. And if Hashem would not have taken us out of Mitzrayim, we would still maintain a certain slave mentality. And because Hashem took us out of Egypt and He raised us up to become His nation, so in our mind we don't feel like we're slaves to a pharaoh in Egypt. In our mind, we feel like we're free people. Now, it's a little bit risky for me to say this, and I can't even gauge reaction by people's faces because the video is off. So I'm not sure if this is a smart move on my part or not, but I'll risk it. And they say that I think that historically we do see this. I mean, thankfully it's changing. It's not the case so much anymore. But after the blacks were freed from all their years of slavery in the United States of America, you don't just change instantaneously from being a slave to having a free man mentality, right? They didn't even know what to do with themselves. Some of them offered to stay and work on the plantation of the same guy that had made their lives miserable because they didn't know what to do. So perhaps we would have maintained that slave mentality, and we still would have felt like we're slaves to Paro, even though we were actually physically not slaves. We were not slaves at all. We were free men. But because our whole identity that we identified ourselves with was that we were slaves to Paro, that would not have left us, and we would continue to walk around that way, still feeling that way. David Hamelch says in Tehillim, we read it today in Hallel this morning, in Ma'ashiv, he says, Ani avdecha ben amasecha. So the way that some people explain that, I am your slave, the son of your maidservant, is that what he's saying is, if somebody was free and they were captured and they were made into a slave, so then they've tasted freedom, they know what it is that they're missing, and they want out, right? But David HaMelech is saying, Hashem, I want to be your servant. I don't want out. The greatest joy that I could have in life is to serve your slave, and I'm the son of your maidservant. In other words, I was born into captivity, and this is the only, not real captivity, but I was born to serve you, and this is all that I know. This is my whole life. This is my whole identity. That's all that I want. My whole desire is just to serve you. I don't want to taste freedom. I just want to serve you. So perhaps that's what it means over here also, that even generations and generations later, it would be part of our DNA. It would be part of our psyche that we would feel like we're slaves. The Haggadah continues, and the Haggadah says, and this mitzvah to tell the story of the Exodus is for everyone. It doesn't make a difference if we are wise people, if we're elders, if we've done the Seder many times. Even if we know the entire Torah, we still have a mitzvah to tell the story of the Exodus. And the more you do it, the more praiseworthy it is. So this is really true. I mean, obviously, the more sophisticated one is, and depending on who's at the Seder with you, is going to be what your conversation is going to look like. But one equally fulfills the mitzvah by having deep philosophical conversations, and by just telling the story, perhaps even more, just telling the story of the Exodus. You'll say, but we know this story already. You're right, but it's not about gaining the knowledge. It's about talking about it. It's about feeling it. It's about living it. So therefore, the mitzvah is to just go and tell the story. And the more one discusses the actual story, the better it is. One of my favorite Sedarim, Pesach Seders that I remember was when my father actually went and he took out a Chumash and he opened up to Parshas Shmos, where the slavery starts. We might have actually started from Yosef being sold as a slave. I'm not sure. But we started talking about the slavery, and we worked our way through. We worked our way through the story. Sometimes, actually, the best way to do it is if you get just like the Medrash says, or even the kids' version, the little Medrash says, and you read through the story, and you have clear what it is, especially if you do it beforehand, before Pesach, and then at the Seder you sit there and you talk about it, and that's exactly what you discuss. You discuss the story, and you go through the storyline, and you present it in an exciting fashion. Now, somebody might think that this is a little bit of an exaggeration. Like even the Talmud Chachams, that's what they're going to do all night long. They're going to sit and tell the story. So that's where the next paragraph of the Haggadah comes in. The Haggadah tells us a story, and interestingly, this story has no source other than the Haggadah itself. In other words, it's not mentioned in any medrash. It's not mentioned in the Talmud. The source of this story is the Haggadah. So what's the story? Excuse me. The story is that there were these 5 rabbis: Maseh, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. These 5 rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, that they were having a Seder in Bnei Brak. And they were telling the story of the Exodus the entire night. Now, you might think to yourself that, okay, that's a good proof. I mean, I guess that means that this is how they kept themselves busy with all night long. But maybe that's an exaggeration. Does all night long really mean all night long? And maybe it means 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. So the Haggadah continues, and the Haggadah says, no. Ad shebo talmidem v'amrulem. Until their students came, they knocked on the door. And they said, Rabbi Seinu, higiyazman kriyash mashal shachris. Our rabbis, it's time to come to shul. It's time to daven Shema already. Now, why did the rabbis themselves not know? So I think usually people assume that the story took place in a cave. Could be. It's very possible that's what happened. The story took place in a cave. It's also possible that they were so engrossed in the story that they didn't realize. Rabbi Aaron Kotler was the first Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood. Now today Lakewood is probably the biggest Torah center in the United States of America, but Rabbi Aaron Kotler was the one who started it. When he started it, so he had this yeshiva there in Lakewood, and he actually didn't live in Lakewood. He actually lived in Brooklyn because Lakewood wasn't a place to raise Jewish children. So he lived in Brooklyn. He would drive in, and I think he would go home for Shabbos or some Shabboses. But anyway, so when he gave his classes, they say he was like a ball of fire. I mean, he died way before I was born, but he was full of excitement. And one time he was giving his class, and there was thunder and lightning. So the halacha is that when you see thunder and lightning, so there's a bracha that you say on the thunder and the lightning. So the students interrupted the class, and they said a bracha out loud. So he said to them, he said, I'm not upset with you for making the bracha. Of course, if you see the lightning, if you hear the thunder, you're obligated to say a bracha. Of course, that's true. He said, I'm just upset with you. I don't understand how it is that you even noticed it. We're in the middle of shir. I'm giving a class. You're all supposed to be paying attention. How is it that you even noticed it? Now, they would have to be quite impressive students for them not to notice it. But I guess he didn't notice it while he was busy giving the class. So he said, I would hope to be able to get the same from you, that you would be so busy paying attention that you didn't notice. So it's entirely possible that if that was his expectation in the 1950s, that when this story took place almost 2,000 years ago, that they weren't in a cave. They were in a room with windows, but they were just so engrossed in the story that nobody noticed that the sun had rose and that it was and there was a brand new day. Now the students came to get them. Probably, I would guess, because they noticed that they weren't in shul, and maybe they knew they were having a seder together, and therefore they said maybe they're just maybe something's wrong, or maybe they didn't realize. Now, why did they stop them? Why did they stop them? Generally, we have a rule that if you're busy doing one mitzvah, you don't have to stop to do another mitzvah. Now, when it comes to Torah, that's actually not true. If somebody's studying Torah and another mitzvah comes their way, so then it depends. If the mitzvah could be performed by someone else, you should let someone else perform it. But if not, then you have to stop. So, right. So, like for example, let's say if we had minyan right now, and right about now would be time to daven mincha. So if somebody would be in this class, we wouldn't say like, okay, fine, you could skip mincha because you could stay in the class. We would say, no, it's very nice that you're studying Torah, but the whole point of studying Torah is to know how to do the mitzvahs properly. So when a mitzvah comes your way, you can't ignore it. You have to go do your mitzvah. So you would be obligated to go daven mincha. So, but this is not just the study of Torah. This is telling the story of the Exodus. So perhaps that would take precedence. They could push off davening. But the simple answer to that is that no, the mitzvah of telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus, that's only Pesach night. But if the sun rose, it's a new day. It's not the nighttime anymore. So the mitzvah's over. So the students came to tell them, they said, you probably don't realize that the sun rose. But since the sun rose, so that mitzvah ended already. So once that mitzvah ended, now it's time to move on to the next mitzvah. Now it's time to daven. Now, one last technical issue about this paragraph, and that is like this. We have the afikomen. The afikomen, of course, is a piece of matzah, and it's supposed to remind us of the Korban Pesach. So in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, we had a Korban Pesach. We don't have that today, so in its place, we have to have a piece of matzah. When did the Korban Pesach and now the afikomen have to be eaten by? So this is a matter of great debate in the Talmud. There's two opinions. One opinion says you have the entire night to do it. Just do it before dawn. Let's use the word dawn. Aros HaShachar. Aros HaShachar is 72 minutes before sunrise. So once 72 minutes before sunrise comes, we already start to assume that the nighttime is over and the new day has begun. So make sure that you eat it before then, before dawn. But as long as you eat it before dawn, that's perfect. You fulfill the mitzvah. The other opinion says, nope, you don't have all night long to do it. You have to finish by midnight. So midnight doesn't mean midnight, means halachic midnight, but whatever that is, you have to finish by the middle of the night. And there's a big disagreement. And how we paskin, how we follow in halach is also a matter of debate. It happens to be that the different opinions are represented over here in this story. Some of the rabbis in the story were of the opinion that you have all night long to do it, and some of them were of the opinion that you have to do it by the middle of the night. So the question is, what happened here in this story? So you could also ask it like this. It says that they were busy telling the story of the Exodus until the students came to them and said, no, Rabbi, it's time to go to shul. Did they ever get up to Rachza, Motzi Matzah, Mara, Korech, Shulchan Aruch? Did they ever proceed with the Seder? Or were they still in the middle of Magid? It's hard to believe that they were still in the middle of Magid and that they didn't fulfill all the eating mitzvahs that we have Pesach night, that they didn't drink another 3 cups of wine, that they didn't eat the matzah. So you would have to say that what they did was that during Magid, somebody had a great idea, and they did like many of us do at our Seder. They say, it's a really wonderful idea, but unfortunately we're short of time. So after we finish the afikomen, let's come back to it. And then the next paragraph, they started having a whole discussion. And then somebody started to say something and said, you know what? It's getting late. Hold on to that, and we'll come back to it after we finish the afikomen. And because we just have to proceed. So they proceeded. They fulfilled all of the mitzvos of the night. And then after all that was over, so then they went back to all the discussions that they were having. So based on that, you could say that perhaps also they said, you know what, we want everybody to be comfortable at the Seder. We know some people that are at the Seder are of the opinion that you have until the middle of the night. And other people that are at the Seder are of the opinion that you have that you have all night long to do it. But we don't want anyone to be uncomfortable. So we're going to move quickly so that we'll finish the afikomen by the middle of the night, and then afterwards we'll go back to all of our discussions. So therefore, there was nobody at the Seder that had to feel that his halachic opinion wasn't being accommodated for. Now let's just do one last paragraph. The next paragraph, interestingly enough, is not exactly about Pesach. You see, there's a mitzvah. By the way, if anyone has a question, you want to unmute your microphone and ask, feel free. There's a mitzvah Pesach night to there's a mitzvah Pesach night to relate the entire story of the Exodus. There's also a mitzvah on a daily basis to mention that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. And in fact, if you look in the Art Scroll Siddur in Shema, so the very last sentence of Shema says, "Ani Hashem Elokechem asher hotzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim." I am Hashem your God that took you out of the land of Egypt. And it says over there in the indentation, it says, when you say this, you should have in mind that I am about to fulfill the daily mitzvah of remembering that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Now, the daily mitzvah is just to mention that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Pesach night, the mitzvah is not to mention that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Pesach night, the mitzvah is to sit there and to have a whole discussion about it, questions and answers, starting from the negative, working your way to the positive. It's a much longer mitzvah. Now, for some reason, there's a Mishnah in Masechta Brachos. There's a Mishnah in Masechta Brachos, and the Mishnah in Masechta Brachos talks about not the Pesach mitzvah, but to mention, not to tell the story, but to mention that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. There's a debate over there in the Mishnah. What is the nature of this mitzvah? Is the mitzvah to do it once a day, or is the mitzvah to do it twice a day? So there's two opinions over there in the Mishnah, and for some reason, this got recorded and put over here in the Haggadah also, even though it's technically not really connected to the story of to Pesach itself. It's a daily discussion, but it got put here anyway. What's the crux of the issue? The crux of the issue is like this. The pasuk says, "L'ma'an tizkar es yom tzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha." You should remember for all the days of your life that Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim. So very simply, that means that we have to remember every single day. The question is, it has this word kol, all the days of your life. You could just say, remember the days of your life that Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim. What does it mean to remember all the days of your life that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim? What's that word all? So what's that word all? So there's two opinions over here in the Mishnah. One opinion says that all the days of your life means this life and the next life. What does it mean, the next life? It means when Mashiach is going to come. So therefore, it's coming to teach me that even when Mashiach is going to come, and as the Talmud explains, there's going to be tremendous miracles. And right now, the greatest miracles that ever occurred was the Exodus, right? The 10 plagues, and then the splitting of the sea, and then I guess you also have the giving of the Torah. But when we think about the unbelievable miracles that occurred and how we became a nation, so that is the Exodus. So therefore, that is the pinnacle. So therefore, whenever we think of miracles, that's what we think of. However, when Mashiach comes, so there's actually a pasuk that even says, when Mashiach comes, everything is going to be so great that you're not even going to say anymore, wow, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Instead, you're going to say, Hashem brought Mashiach. So that's going to be the focus. So, however, the Chachamim say that, no, it doesn't mean that. It means that that's going to be an additional focus. The main idea will be that now that Mashiach came, but we're still going to talk about Mitzrayim. So therefore, when the pasuk says that you should mention all the days of your life that about the Exodus from Egypt, so days of your life means now, and all the days of your life comes to include that even when Mashiach comes, we should also remember that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. However, Ben Zoma and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, they disagree with this, and they say that no, that when Mashiach comes, so we understand the pasuk, the verse in its literal sense, that we will no longer talk about the Exodus from Egypt. We'll have much more bigger and better things to talk about. We'll talk about the fact that Mashiach came. So what does it mean then, all the days of your life? What does that word all come to include? So they say all comes to include nighttime. So Yemei Chayecha, the days of your life, that's Hayam, that's referring to the days. But Kol Yemei Chayecha, the extra word Kol, all, that's referring to the nighttime. So interestingly enough, the halacha does follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Ben Zoma, and that is why we now mention Hashem taking us out of Egypt in the daily Shema. We mention it during the daytime and also at nighttime. Now, they'll say to me, like, what do you mean? Of course, it's part of Shema. We have to say Shema. But the truth is that the main idea of the third paragraph of Shema is tzitzis. And tzitzis is not applicable at night. You're actually not obligated to wear tzitzis at night. One should not go as soon as it becomes nighttime and rip off his tzitzis. That would be inappropriate. But if somebody like took a shower or something like that, and it's already nightfall, then he's 100% not obligated to no reason to put his tzitzis back on. Maybe for Kabbalistic reasons, but you're not obligated to put your tzitzis back on because nightfall. The mitzvah of tzitzis does not apply at night. So therefore, we would actually skip the whole third paragraph, except for the fact that we need the last pasuk, because the last pasuk says, "Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeichi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim." I am Hashem your God that took you out of the land of Egypt. That's why it is applicable until. That is why it's applicable at night also, and that's why we have to say. That's why we have to say that paragraph also. Now, I'll just point out one last thing, and then I'll wish you a good night and thank you for coming. And that is like this: the paragraph starts out with this almost cryptic phrase. It says, Omer Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Harei ani kiven shivim shana. I am like 70 years old. Now, he doesn't say I am 70. He says I am like 70. So the question is, why does he say I'm like 70? Now, the truth is that the Talmud tells us the answer to this. It has absolutely nothing to do with the story of the Exodus. And therefore, many people point out that while it's a really great and exciting story, it's not really appropriate to share at the Seder. Because, like we keep on saying, the focus of the Seder is supposed to be the Exodus. There's this whole story, I'll just mention it very quickly, because now we're not at the Pesach Seder. But there's this whole story that Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, he was the leader of the Jewish people, and then because he treated Rabbi Yeshua in a way that the other sages felt was inappropriate, they basically voted to impeach him, and he was no longer the Nasi, and then they were trying to figure out who to put in his place, and they said, let's put Rabbi Yeshua in his place, he's the second in command, and people felt that was wrong, because people might think that Rabbi Yeshua just did it to somehow, it would be unfair to Rabbi Gamliel to take the guy that caused the whole story to happen and make him the guy that would be in command. Then they said Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva was nixed for a different reason, and they're going through the different possibilities. And finally, they said Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So they asked Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah if he would take the job, and he spoke to his wife, and his wife said, but you're so young. You're only 18 years old. So apparently this was a legitimate concern that he's not going to be respected because he's only 18 years old. And the Gemara tells us that night he grew this long white beard. I don't know if he grew the beard and it was white, or just he had a beard and it turned white. The Rambam, who generally likes to keep the world in a more rationalist perspective, the Rambam actually says that once he became the leader, so his desk got filled with all types of problems, and therefore it was a natural thing that because of the stress, his hair turned white. But most people assume not like the Rambam; they assume that a miracle occurred and his hair turned white. So on that very day, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the next morning, he's talking. And he's now the leader of the Jewish people. And he says, it's true that I'm not an old man, but he says, I'm like an old man. Look at me. And Hashem has given my appearance to be like I'm old. So to go more into the story is not for now. It's in the 4th chapter of Brachos. But that's why that's why it's there. So I don't know, somehow I'm like tempted to tell the story as long as I preempt it by saying, but that's not really what it's about. But it's really, that's not what it's about. That's not what the Seder is about. So this paragraph, like I said, is not really a discussion about the mitzvah of telling the Exodus on Pesach night. This paragraph is really more about the mitzvah of the daily mitzvah that we do every single day, and that mitzvah we fulfill just by mentioning the words, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Just by mentioning those words, we have fulfilled the daily mitzvah, if you say it like I just said, or if you say that last pasuk from Shema, that we fulfill that. And there was a disagreement between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah ben Zoma and the Chachamim. The Chacham said that the mitzvah is only during the day, and the mitzvah will continue in times of Mashiach. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Zoma disagreed, and they said that no, when Mashiach comes, there will be much greater things to talk about. We will no longer talk about the Exodus, but we will talk about we will talk about Mashiach. So now we mention it both by day and by night. One last thing, and that is that the way the paragraph starts out is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says like this. He says, I was always of the opinion you said at night, but I was not able to persuade anyone else to join me. Then Ben Zoma came, and it seems more he had like a feeling that should be the halacha, that we should say it at night, but he couldn't prove it. Then Ben Zoma came, Ben Zoma showed how it was hinted to in the pasuk. Now it becomes a team of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Ben Zoma, and it seems to be that's why the halacha follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Ben Zoma. Okay, anyone have any questions?
I hope it's not too late to daven.
Just about now. Yeah, I would go right now. Don't forget to say Yalav.
Yashakot.
Thanks for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, everyone have a good night.
Good night. Next.
Paul, what time we called for? 7:45?
Uh-huh.
We got 5 minutes.
Okay, relax, a bit.
I'm trying to decide if I have to relocate inside.
Oh, well,
As it gets dark out here, it might be hard to see me.
yeah, this is true. You have this book? You see it?
No, your video's off.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. You have this book?
No.
It's great. It's awesome. It talked about the life of each rabbi and how we relates the Mishnahs, and very powerful, very powerful.
Oh, sounds fascinating.
Okay, so
If you don't mind, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the meeting because it recorded it, and then I can put it up on YouTube later.
Thank you. Okay.
And then I'll start again the same meeting again.
Got
It just
it.
requires.
Okay, bye.